What is a secret that you will never tell anyone? Story 1. About a week before I graduated high school, my family experienced a massive house fire. We lived out in the country, and since no one was home, by the time anyone noticed it was on fire, it was already too far gone. Flames were shooting 30 feet above the roof. We lost everything, but thankfully we had insurance and no one was hurt. At the time, I was taking a chemistry class where about 70% of the grade depended on a lab notebook that was graded all at once at the end of the semester. We would do labs every week and then complete write-ups in the notebook. Unfortunately, I had been slacking off and was way behind on the assignment. To catch up, I would have needed to pull a few all-nighters just to turn something in. The day after the fire, I went to class and told my teacher that my notebook had been destroyed in the fire and that I had no idea how I would ever complete the assignment. He was incredibly kind, told me not to worry about it, and gave me 100% on the entire assignment. He said I had bigger things to worry about. I was about to graduate, and he hoped my family was doing okay. Well, the notebook was in my car the whole time. I threw it away and swore myself to secrecy. Story 2. When I was in high school, I had trouble talking to people. I was the shy kid. One day I found out my cousin went to the same school. He was in a similar boat as me, though he was more social and funnier. However, he didn't really click with others, just with me. We became best friends and had a blast at lunch every day. One day, a really cute girl invited me to go eat sushi with her, and I was so excited. I had plans with my cousin. It was sort of a tradition for us, but I decided to bail on him. I told him, "Yo, this really cute girl asked me to eat sushi with her." And although he seemed upset, he told me, "Cool, have fun." When it was time to go eat, I went with the girl. But when we met up with her friends, they decided to eat somewhere else. The problem? There was only room for one more in their car. Without hesitating, the girl said yes, hopped in, and left me behind. I was devastated. I didn't have the courage to face my cousin or tell him what had happened. As I walked through the hallways, I was scared of running into him. Eventually, I passed by the library and saw him sitting there, alone passing the time. It broke my heart. I had ditched him, and for what? Never again. Bros before everything. Story 3. When I was 6, I had an experience I didn't tell my mother about until 15 years later. My paternal grandmother had 2 dogs, Tessa, a ditzy Maltese, and Bindi, a Rhodesian Ridgeback. Tessa was too sweet and clueless to ever be mean, so we always played with her during visits. Bindi, on the other hand, was always locked away in part of the house. When I asked why, my mother would just say, "Bindi doesn't like kids." My mother had reasons to be wary of dogs like Bindi. When I was born, she had to put down her first dogs because they were aggressive toward me, even throwing themselves at windows if they saw me. For the first year and a half of my life, we operated under an airlock system, with 2 doors always between me and the dogs. When my grandmother moved to the house directly behind ours, we installed a gate between our yards. Suddenly, Bindi was accessible. We kept a respectful distance from her most of the time. One day I was playing in the garden with KD, our very patient Labrador. We were playing circus, a game that KD endured with endless patience. The only thing that ever made him mad was seeing a horse. Bindi wandered into the yard and started watching us. In a burst of foolishness, I ran toward her, trying to involve her in the game. She panicked and bit me. Not hard, but enough to leave some indents and a small bruise. I didn't bleed, but I was scared. So I cried and sulked in my cubby house until I calmed down. I knew I couldn't tell my mom because I'd get in big trouble for playing with Bindi. The next day I was back in the garden with KD, and Bindi was there too, but I ignored her. For weeks I avoided her whenever she came near. Then something changed. Bindi started following me everywhere. She'd sit with me, cuddle on the sofa, and stay at my side wherever I went. It was like she was making up for that bite. From then on, she became my sweet and loyal companion. We were best friends for 4 more years until she passed away. My parents always remarked on how miraculous it was that Bindi, an old ornery dog who hated everyone, had suddenly become this oversized lapdog. Even years after her passing, they marveled at her transformation. I didn't tell my mom until my 20s that the reason Bindi loved me so much was because she had bitten me. Story 4. When I was in 2nd grade, I had one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. 3 days in a row. My teacher had a strict policy, no bathroom breaks, even during free time in class. The first 2 days, I ended up wetting my pants in class because she refused to let me go. The 3rd time, I spent 10 minutes begging her before she finally relented, but I didn't make it. I wet my pants on the way to the bathroom. My family only knows about one of those incidents, but I had to endure the embarrassment 3 times, all in the first week of school. After that, I started bringing a water bottle to class and discreetly peeing in it whenever I had to. I did this for the rest of the year. Looking back, if I could go back in time, I'd tell my younger self to just pee on her desk. That would have been less humiliating than wetting myself 3 days in a row. Story 5. Primera friend awareness sa your. When I was a teenager, I saw my friend steal 2 cans of soup. I was on my break at the grocery store where I worked and thought I saw her walk in. Curious, I went looking through the aisles to say hi. When I found her, she had her back to me and was holding a big satchel-style bag. I watched as she quickly tossed 2 cans of soup into it and looked around nervously to make sure no one had seen her. She didn't look behind her. If she had, she would have noticed me. She started walking away, so I called her name cheerfully, as though I'd just spotted her. She turned, looking startled and terrified. She stammered out a quick hello and said she had to run to her mom's car because she forgot something. She didn't come back inside. This was a 16-year-old girl with 3 younger sisters and a single mom who was battling addiction. She had to be more of a parent than her mom ever was. If she was desperate enough to steal 2 cans of soup so her family could eat that night, who was I to embarrass her or say anything to anyone? Story 6. Around 10 years ago, when I was a teenager, my dad, who worked in the video game industry, gave me a high-end gaming laptop worth $3,000. He didn't need it, but he made it very clear. No drinks near the laptop because I was notoriously clumsy. One night, I brought a huge bowl of cereal into my room and set it next to the laptop while I went to get a spoon. I had a blanket over my shoulders and, as I sat down, I accidentally flipped the bowl over. Milk flooded the open laptop. I panicked. I turned it off, cleaned it as best as I could, and went to bed, terrified. The next day, the laptop wouldn't turn on. When my dad asked what happened, I lied, saying it worked perfectly the night before. Years later, I finally confessed to him. To my surprise, he had no idea what really happened. He wasn't even mad. He laughed it off and was impressed that the story had gone viral online. Telling him the truth felt like a huge weight off my shoulders, and I'm glad I finally owned up to it. Story 7. When I was 8 years old, we had pet mice. One of our female mice gave birth, but she started eating some of her babies. I was horrified and distraught. Why would a mother do that to her own babies? Upset and angry, I rushed to tell my stepfather. Instead of comforting me, his reaction was monstrous. He forced me to kill the mother mouse. He filled the sink with water, dragged me into the kitchen, and grabbed my hand. Despite my cries and struggles, he made me hold the mother mouse underwater until she drowned. I was sobbing the entire time, desperately trying to pull my hand away, but he wouldn't let me. As if that wasn't horrifying enough, he then took the surviving baby mice and fed them to his fish. I think it was called an Oscar fish, though I'm not entirely sure. I was too young to understand everything, but I knew this was wrong. My stepfather was a deeply abusive and deranged person. Eventually, my mom left him after he beat her so badly that she almost didn't survive. To this day, I've never told anyone this story. Even though I was just a kid and I know he forced me, the shame and pain still linger. Story 8. I was walking my dog on a dirt road near my subdivision. This road ran parallel to several backyards and was lined with trees, making it feel like a secluded nature trail. It was my escape from people and noise. One morning as I was walking, I spotted 2 of my neighbors. They were both married to other people. They were making out and clearly about to take things further. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't hear me approaching until my dog barked. We all froze for several seconds, just staring at each other in stunned silence. Then, without a word, they bolted in the direction of their respective backyards. I knew both of them, but we weren't close, and I didn't know their spouses well either. I decided to keep what I saw to myself. Neither of them ever acknowledged what happened, and I've never mentioned it to anyone. I have no idea if that was a one-time thing or part of a long-term affair, but I never saw anything like it again. Story 9. Last Christmas, it was just me and my mom. She's the only family I have. She had prepared a lot of food for the day, but she started drinking heavily and got completely drunk. I didn't realize how bad it was because I was only 17 and had little experience with alcohol. At one point, she tried to cut a piece of pork to give me, but she was so drunk that she couldn't even manage that. About 20 minutes later, she was trying to take the pork out of the oven and ended up dropping it on the kitchen floor. Hot oil spilled everywhere, coating the floor and making a huge mess. As she clumsily tried to pick up the food, she slipped on the oil and hit her head on the floor. She wasn't knocked unconscious, but she was dazed and confused. I had to clean the food off the floor, wipe the oil off her, and carry her to bed. After that, I spent the rest of the night cleaning the kitchen. Once everything was as clean as I could get it, I drove around town looking for a place to eat on Christmas, but nothing was open. I ended up going to bed hungry. To this day, the only person who knows about that night is my girlfriend. Storytime. I've never shared the full details of this story because I'm still deeply unsettled by what I witnessed, or think I witnessed. It's one of those things where no amount of talking about it would ever change what happened. A few years ago, I visited my mother's hometown in Mexico with her and my younger sister. This was shortly after the Durango plane crash, and the anxiety from that, combined with adjusting to the time difference, kept me up late at night. We were staying at my great-uncle's house, where I was sleeping on a futon while my mom and sister shared the bed. One night, as I lay awake playing games on my phone, I heard a gunshot. I live in a dangerous neighborhood back home, so I didn't think much of it at first. Then I heard 2 more gunshots, much closer this time. I thought it could be someone drunk. It was wedding season. Or maybe I was hallucinating from exhaustion. No one else woke up, so I stayed quiet and tried to go back to sleep. The next morning, my mom asked if I'd been awake the previous night. When I said yes, she asked if I'd heard anything. I told her I'd heard gunshots but didn't think it was anything serious. Her face went pale. She told me that the neighbor 2 houses down had murdered his wife with a shotgun that night. The entire town knew, and he was arrested quickly. She had been shot at least twice. I asked if anyone else had been hurt, but my mom said it was just the wife. The town was close to a city with strict gun control laws, so firearms were rare. But here's what I can't stop thinking about. The first gunshot I heard, it didn't sound like the shotgun. It was sharper, more like a handgun. Who fired that first shot? Did the wife have a gun and try to defend herself? Was it just a drunk person, as I originally thought? Or did someone else die that night and no one knows about it? I've tried asking people in the town, but no one else seems to have heard that first shot, just the 2 from the shotgun. It's a small town where everyone knows each other, but even they didn't suspect the neighbor was capable of this. I don't know if I want to know who fired that first shot. The uncertainty still haunts me. Story 11. When I was in 6th grade, my math teacher held a contest where teams of 2 had a week to guess how many jelly beans were in a large container. The team that guessed closest would win all the jelly beans. Kids were obsessed with it, counting individual jelly beans before class and walking around it, analyzing its size. One day, the teacher accidentally mentioned that the correct number was written on a piece of paper under the screw-on lid of the container. That gave me an idea. I approached a kid named Nate and told him I'd split my share of the jelly beans with him if he helped me. The plan was simple. On our way to lunch, Nate would tell the teacher he forgot his lunchbox and run back to the classroom. While there, he'd unscrew the lid, check the number, and then fill out a guess form with my and my partner's names on it. I specifically told him not to guess the exact number because that would look suspicious. By the end of the week, I won the contest. When Nate came to collect his share, I gave him 1 handful of jelly beans, just 1. He was furious, saying it wasn't fair, but I shrugged and basically told him, "What are you going to do about it?" Then I ate the rest of the 300 jelly beans over the next 3 days. I know I sound like a jerk, but I swear I'm not as bad as I was in 6th grade. I just really love sugar. I told this story to my wife once, and I think she sees me a little differently now. Story 12. I'm a gay man, and a while back I met an older guy online. We clicked immediately, playing games together, chatting a lot, even FaceTiming. I thought we were just good friends until one day he admitted that the only reason he started talking to me was because I seemed gay. He wasn't wrong. After a few dates, we ended up hooking up a few times. Then, just weeks later, my parents invited me to a family event to meet some distant relatives. I didn't really want to go, but my cousin convinced me it could be fun. At the event, I was surrounded by unfamiliar faces. My grandfather has 11 sisters and 2 brothers, so the family tree is massive. But then I saw someone I recognized, my internet friend. We pretended to be meeting for the first time and quietly tried to piece together how we were related. It turns out he's my grandfather's sister's son, my first cousin once removed. To make matters worse, he's married with 3 kids. He had told me he was single. After that awkward encounter, we distanced ourselves from each other, though we occasionally still play games together on Steam. I've never told anyone about this because, well, who would want to hear it? I had us with my first cousin once removed, and a married man. It's a secret I plan to keep to myself. Story 13. From fourth grade until my senior year of high school, one of my best friends was a compulsive liar. I loved this kid like a brother. We did everything together, and he had this amazing ability to make me forget about my own problems when we hung out. He was genuinely a nice guy, but the lies started early on, and I still remember the first one he told me. He claimed to have written a song and sang it for me. I instantly recognized the song but didn't call him out. I thought he was just joking. As time went on, the lies grew. By high school, he was lying about everything: his parents, his job, who he hung out with, and what he was doing when I'd ask him to hang out. For a while, I thought he just didn't like me anymore. After high school, we lost touch. Then one day I was out running and he stopped in his car. We hadn't spoken in years, but he pulled over and we ended up talking on the side of the road. He told me he missed me and wanted to hang out again. I followed through and messaged him a couple of days later. No response. After that, his life seemed to spiral out of control. He started arguing with his parents and eventually got kicked out of their house. In 2013, he moved in with another friend and their parents, but they kicked him out too. He ended up living out of his car. One night, he asked if he could crash at my place for a few nights. I said no, even though I could have said yes. By then, the years of lies had chipped away at our friendship. I didn't feel like he was my best friend anymore, or even a friend at all. After that night, we never spoke again. Story 14. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, I got in trouble for saying a silly word. My mom warned me that if I said it again, she'd wash my mouth out with soap. Being a kid, I inevitably said it again. True to her word, she dragged me into the kitchen, made me sit on the counter, and stuck a bar of soap in my mouth. I had to sit there with it for what felt like forever, and it tasted horrible. When my dad found out, he was furious. A massive argument broke out between my parents. It ended with my dad holding my mom down on the sofa by her throat and then taking me out of the house. We drove around all day, and I remember feeling like my whole world was falling apart. I didn't fully understand what was happening, but I knew things would never be the same. When we returned that evening, the house was in chaos. Bags were packed, and my mom had smashed a large glass-encased radio and vinyl player from the 80s. There was blood everywhere. My memory fades to black after that. Even as a kid, I knew something was profoundly wrong. That moment stayed with me, shaping who I am today. It's the root of my attachment and abandonment issues. It's why I find it so hard to trust anyone, and why the moment I sense something is off with someone, my defenses go up and I emotionally shut down. I do everything independently because relying on people has only ever let me down. This experience has left such a deep scar that I struggle to see myself ever having a truly happy relationship. Whoever I end up with would have to understand and accept these deeply ingrained issues. And honestly, I'm not sure anyone would want to take that on. Story 15. I used to work at an adult foster care group home, and it was one of the hardest experiences of my life. One of my coworkers was always high during her shifts, and her behavior quickly escalated into abuse toward the residents. I reported her to management multiple times, but no one took it seriously. Eventually, I had enough and decided to take matters into my own hands. I anonymously contacted CPS, Child Protective Services, and APS, Adult Protective Services, and reported the abuse. I also reached out to the Rights Office and other organizations, making as many calls as I could. Someone had to care about these vulnerable people, even if the management didn't. No one believed my claims until one of the residents was raped. That tragedy set off a chain reaction, and suddenly everyone wanted to know who had been anonymously complaining. They even suggested that the person should show their face, since they had been so right. I never came forward, but I was relieved when all the staff, including the managers, were investigated and ultimately fired. Still, I hated every moment of working there. I worked over 100 hours a week just to ensure the residents weren't being abused on my watch, but I still feel like I didn't do enough. Some days the guilt is overwhelming and takes away my appetite for weeks. I'll never understand why some people work at group homes if they don't genuinely care about the residents. No one forced them to take the job. It's not hard to be a decent human being, especially to those who can't fully comprehend or navigate life. Story 16. It was 1969, and I was 11 years old. My bedtime was 9 p.m., but around 9:30 the phone rang, and I picked up the extension near my bedroom. It was my mom's best friend Charlotte in absolute hysterics. Her ex-husband Jack had a rifle pointed at her, and I could hear him threatening to kill her. I was terrified, but what scared me even more was realizing that my mom was going to drive over to Charlotte's house to intervene. Back then, the police wouldn't respond to domestic disputes, so my mom felt she had no choice. Without her knowing, I threw on some shorts and quietly climbed into the back seat of the car, lying flat on the floor. I stayed silent as she drove across town into an incredibly dangerous situation. When we arrived, Charlotte was outside in just her bra and panties, blood dripping from her nose and ear. Jack stood nearby, holding a rifle aimed at her. My mom got out of the car and started talking to him. For over half an hour, she calmly but firmly negotiated with him until he finally handed her the rifle. She then helped Charlotte into the front seat of the car and drove us all to the police station. On the way there, Charlotte told us she had called the police 5 times that night, but no one would come. When we got to the station, my mom confronted the police chief. As I hid in the floorboard, I heard her address him by his first name, Mike, and threaten him. "I'm going to make sure you don't even get elected dog catcher if you don't go and throw him in jail now." Years later, we never spoke about that night, but it stuck with me. My mom passed away 6 years later, but her courage and strength that night have stayed with me ever since. She will always be my hero. Story 17. From 2015 to 2017, I worked for what I thought was my dream company. My dad had worked there for 20 years, and I believed they treated him well. The pay was great, and I loved the work. During those 2 years, I thrived, receiving great reviews and forming strong relationships with my clients. But after 2 years, the department was restructured, and the last 10 hires, myself included, were laid off. It felt like my world collapsed. My clients and managers complained to no avail, and though some clients wanted to hire me, their offers required relocation, which I couldn't afford. I tried to stay positive, leaning on the grit I'd inherited from my tough, military agricultural family, but being jobless for 3 months in a small town with limited opportunities and $1,700 a month in student loan debt weighed heavily on me. I've always owned firearms for hunting and protection. One night, while spiraling in my thoughts, I found myself holding one of my guns, considering the unthinkable. But when I checked the chamber, a wave of clarity hit me. I put the gun down and cried myself to sleep. A moment of vulnerability that was hard to admit as a 6'7", 300-pound man. The next morning, I collected all my weapons, guns, bullets, bows, arrows, knives, and gave them to my dad. I simply asked him to lock them up and told him I'd ask for them back someday. He didn't ask questions. He just agreed. Deep down, I think he knew what was going on, but he never brought it up. A week later, I reconnected with the woman who would later become my wife. She encouraged me to go back to church, where I found strength and purpose again. 4 months later, I secured a temp job, which led to another and eventually a full-time role in my current career field. About a year ago, just before I got married and moved out, I asked for my guns back. My dad handed them over without saying a word about that night years ago. No one knows I was contemplating suicide that night, outside of possibly my dad. It scares me to think how low I was, but I remind myself that I persevered. I don't share this with loved ones because I don't want them to worry, especially now that I'm in a much better place. Story 18. When I was living on an American military base in Germany, I used to sneak into the tiny convenience store and read porno magazines. I'd carefully open them on the shelves, pretending to look at something else, and read them while trying to be inconspicuous. My plan was to drop the magazine and act like I was reaching for something innocent if I got caught. One day I did get caught, and my plan failed miserably. The store clerk scolded me, saying the magazines were a pain to send back because of their plastic packaging. That wasn't the only time I got caught. I also tried stealing Pokemon cards using the same tactic, opening the packs on the shelf and pocketing the cards. Once, a random army guy caught me in the act. He sternly warned, "You cut that ish out before I send you to jail, son." That moment scared me so much that I almost literally shed my 11-year-old pants. After that, I kept my hands off the magazines and the cards, at least on base. Story 19. In high school, I tried to befriend a girl who didn't seem to have many friends. I went out of my way to be nice to her. I bought her lunch, lent her clothes, and even sent pizza to her family for dinner once. When a school dance came up, I found out she'd never been to one, so I decided to take her as a friend date. I went all out. I bought her a dress, but when she didn't like it, I let her wear my favorite dress and shoes instead. I wore the dress I'd originally bought for her. I took her to dinner and dessert, got her a corsage, and made sure everything was perfect. But as soon as we arrived at the dance, she disappeared. She didn't respond to my texts, and I didn't have anyone else to hang out with, so I left early. She stayed. When I saw her next, I asked for my dress and shoes back. She told me she'd bring them but didn't show up to school for weeks. When she finally returned, she said the dress was ripped and one of the heels on my shoes was broken. I was upset but told her it was fine and tried to move on. 2 days later, she stole $80 from my bag. The money wasn't even mine, it was for a club fundraiser. I reported it to the school, but they wouldn't do anything about it. That's when I decided to get back at her. Her boyfriend, who always flirted with me, sold coke. I convinced him to give me some for free and slipped it into her bag during gym. Then I reported her to campus security for the reward money. I thought she'd just get sent to boot camp for a week like everyone else. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. But it turns out she'd been lying about her age. She was actually 21 and already on probation. She ended up going to prison. Part of me feels bad because I didn't mean to ruin her entire life. I just wanted to get some justice for how she treated me. But another part of me feels like she brought it on herself. Story 20. My father once told me a story from his youth and made me promise never to tell anyone. It's one of the most bizarre and haunting things I've ever heard. When he was around 20 years old, he met a couple of Argentinians who were eccentric hippies. They taught him how to make mushroom tea, a recipe that I now know too. After they left, my dad decided to try making the tea, not to drink it, but because he was fascinated with chemistry. He ended up with a dark black liquid, which he poured into a small Coca-Cola bottle. That same day, he was invited to a festa junina, a traditional country theme party in Brazil. He brought the bottle with him, and for reasons he couldn't explain, poured the entire contents into a large cauldron of quentão, a mulled wine drink, when no one was looking. The rest of the night was absolute chaos. People were freaking out left and right, having panic attacks, seeing hallucinations, and thinking they were dying. Every time one person calmed down, another would start screaming or behaving wildly. My father watched in absolute terror as the entire party descended into madness, realizing what he had done. He never confessed to anyone and just kept quiet, horrified by the scene he'd created. To this day, the thought of that story haunts me. It's such an insane thing to imagine happening, and knowing my dad was behind it is both surreal and unsettling. Story 21. I'm deeply convinced that I'm going to become homeless. While this fear isn't uncommon among people with severe mental illness like me, it's not just fear, it's a persistent, all-encompassing belief. I spend so much time zoned out, imagining what it will be like and trying to plan for it. I think about how I'll survive, where I'll sleep, where I'll find food, and how I'll stay safe. When I'm out in my city, I scout places that look safe to sleep. I take mental notes of food banks, shelters, and places where I might shower or wash my clothes. I've even planned how I might get to a warmer state in the winter. I've been doing this for over a decade. Every day, my mind goes there. 2 people I grew up with became long-term homeless due to substance use and mental illness. Watching them slip through the cracks has reinforced this fear for me. Rationally, I know I have a loving partner and friends who would never let me end up on the streets. But a part of me is certain it's going to happen anyway. At its core, this belief comes from anxiety and a hyper-awareness of how fragile life is. Most people seem to subconsciously believe that things like homelessness can't happen to them. But I don't feel that way. I feel hyper-aware that terrible things can happen to anyone. I see people living on the streets and think, why not me? There's so little separating us. It feels like it all comes down to luck, and my luck has never been good. Story 22. When I was 15, I tried to take my own life. I overdosed on about 40 extra-strength Tylenol pills, the only thing I had access to at the time. A few hours later, as the realization of what I'd done set in, I panicked and stumbled into my parents' room in the middle of the night. I was terrified to tell them, but I did. They rushed me to the hospital, and I was flown via helicopter to a larger facility for treatment. Afterward, I spent 2.5 months at a residential treatment facility where I finished out the school year. Only my immediate family knows that I went to my parents for help. When I returned to school, rumors swirled about why I had left, and eventually people found out I had attempted suicide. I've never told anyone that I saved myself because I've always been afraid